Plants! Long time no see. Would you believe it's episode 3 already? This'll be a good one. Let us begin. Say hello to my little friend. Yeah, guys, I can't guarantee that that's going to be the end of the puns. When it comes to plants, there's just too many puns available. But please stick around. Hello, fellow humans, and welcome to Life by the Fireside with me, Stephen, and my trusty sidekick, Fred, coziest ninja there ever was. Plants are a pretty big deal. They cover so much of the land that they can actually be seen from space. And they're actually how we define many biomes, if you will, like grasslands or forests. And in many cultures, including my own, at this time of year, we take a great big old tree, which is a big plant, and stick it inside our house and decorate it. Which is actually really nice, I think. But, you know, there are some strange things we do with plants sometimes. Plants can be enormous, like trees, or like the great giant redwood, enormous things. Or they can be tiny little things like the grass under your feet. Let's have a look at them all, shall we?
In Latin, the official language of all things taxonomy, the word used for plants is Plantae. And it's one of the kingdoms of eukaryotes, along with animals and fungi and such. It's thought that the very first plant was a type of simple green algae floating around in the sea, but nobody's really sure. I mean, it may have been as long as 1 billion years ago when the first plants came to be. That's a long time ago, but when we talk about plants, we usually think of land-dwelling plants. And these started appearing around 500 million years ago. The landscape of early Earth looked completely different to today. It was dominated by plants like conifers and ferns. There was no grass at all until about 67 million years ago, which isn't actually that long ago, evolutionarily speaking. Even flowers are only thought to have evolved around 125 million years ago. And they've become such a huge part of life on this planet that it's hard to imagine a world without them.
So, what do all plants have in common? Well, it might surprise you to learn that it's not really very much. I mean, yes, we've stated that they're alive and they're eukaryotic, but even the plant's big showstopper, photosynthesis, isn't utilized by every plant. I know! There are parasitic plants! Even the biggest flower in the world, the Rafflesia arnoldii, is a parasite. It is completely parasitic. No photosynthesis at all. Who knew?
At the cellular level, all plants have the eukaryotic elements that we spoke of in the eukaryote episode, but they also have a unique feature in that they all have a cell wall. This is a layer of cellulose around the cell membrane. This makes plant cells more rigid, which comes in handy when it comes to pesky old gravity. Within that cell wall, there are small channels called plasmodesmata. These allow two neighbouring cells to exchange ideas, phone numbers, fluids, that sort of thing. Plant cells also have a rather large vacuole. This can be as large as 80 or 90% of the space in the whole cell. As you can see here, the chloroplasts, the little green organelles, are moving around the edges of these cells. That's firstly to avoid being damaged by too much light, but they are moving around the outside because of the huge vacuole in the middle. The vacuole is basically extra storage space the cell can use to house food or waste.
These are all the common traits in plant cells, but it would be super weird for me to do a whole episode on plants and not talk about the big daddy, photosynthesis. I mean, 99% of all plants use photosynthesis, and it either directly or indirectly powers pretty much all life on Earth, so kind of a big deal. So we spoke about chloroplasts a moment ago. These are the organelles responsible for photosynthesis. Now I want to go into a little bit of detail here, and it's going to mean a little sprinkle of physics and a dash of chemistry, but trust me, it is worth it, guys.
It all starts with the sun, a giant ball of plasma 150 million kilometers away, pumping out light and heat. This reaches Earth about 8 minutes after leaving the surface of the sun and keeps the place nice and toasty. But also, the light strikes the surface of plants, usually leaves, and is absorbed by them to make food. Fun fact, plants absorb all colors of light except for green. So when we see green leaves, this is just the light the plant has no use for bouncing off of it and hitting our eyes.
So how does a plant absorb light and actually create food with it? Well, what we've got to remember is that light is pure energy, and energy can't be lost. It can only be changed, moved on into another form or another. So light can be reflected, it can bounce off, it can be refracted. Think looking through a bathroom window, you can kind of get a fuzzy outline, or it can be absorbed, and that's what happens in plants. Now chlorophyll, that is the agent that we call a pigment in the plant, and that is actually what absorbs the light.
Let me show you how absorption works in plants. If I shout into this piano, listen to what you can hear. Hello! Can you hear that? Suddenly, the piano sounds like me. Why? It's because the particular frequencies of my voice are exciting the same strings in the piano. And so you can think of it like the piano is absorbing my voice. Now we just have to look at atoms and we're nearly there. I told you it would be a bit difficult, but it's really interesting. There are so many elements in the world. They literally are the building blocks of everything. Just as a cell uses proteins to build different things, the elements are used to build everything from water to stone to chlorophyll. Each atom has a different number of electrons, and the number tells you the element. This one's gold. The electrons can be excited by energy, kind of charged up like the piano strings. Remember that energy can't be lost, only changed and moved on. So when the electrons in chlorophyll get excited, the energy has to go somewhere. So it moves to another electron in another chlorophyll and keeps zipping along until it reaches a very special pair of chlorophyll that shoots away the whole charged up electron rather than just passing on the energy to a different electron. This leaves the poor chlorophyll one electron down, which basically turns it into an electron supermagnet. It rips an electron from the closest available atom, which conveniently is the hydrogen in the water the plant has brought along to the party. Once that electron has been ripped from the hydrogen in H2O, it leaves behind the proton and the water molecule breaks apart. Oxygen is super codependent though, and so it immediately wants to hook up with another atom after a breakup. So it sticks to one of the other oxygens that have been ripped out. Luckily for us, two oxygens together, or O2, is very useful for us, for breathing, and it's also no longer required by the plant, so it's released as waste. One man's trash, eh? Those charged electrons that were pushed out of the chlorophyll move along to another set of chlorophyll where they do the same thing again a second time. However, en route, there's a little pathway. Think of it like a river with a water wheel on it. Instead of the water generating electricity by moving along the river, the electrons produce ATP by moving along the electron transport chain. So by now, we've made some ATP, which is an energy molecule. We have some protons in a proton pool waiting to be used. And we have our electrons being shot out of the second chlorophyll straight into the loving arms of another chemical compound, NADP+. This stuff has a plus because it's ready to accept 2 electrons and a proton. Once it does, it becomes NADPH, which is a carrier molecule, ready to bring the protons on to the next stage of photosynthesis, the Calvin cycle. So at the end of the light cycle, we have ATP, NADPH, and leftover waste oxygen.
That's the hard part done, guys. Now for the Calvin cycle.
This takes place in the stroma of the chloroplast, which is full of enzymes. The carbon dioxide that the plant takes in through the leaves mixes with the NADPH, taking the proton and electrons from it, leaving NADP+ again, that can once again be used to transport stuff. It's basically a little bus for electrons and protons. The ATP breaks down and we're left with ADP and a phosphate that is used to combine everything together to make glucose, food for the plant. Well, 1/6 of a glucose. This has to happen 6 times for 1 glucose to be made. It's easier to see with this handy dandy chemical equation over here. We have our reactants, 6 CO2 and 12 water molecules, that have produced glucose, 6 water molecules and 6 oxygen molecules.
You know, that was actually really cool. Now let's never speak of it again. Seriously, I mean, it actually was pretty cool. But I'm no botanist, and if you want to learn a bit more, then have a little look around on YouTube. There are loads of people doing stuff like that. It is quite in depth. The main thing to keep in your mind though is that plants break down CO2 in the atmosphere, which we need, and then they do that and they create more things like strawberries that we also need. Pretty cool.
Now let's turn our attention to where in the world we can find plants. Well, this is pretty obvious, but almost anywhere there's land and fertile soil. Many plants also live in the shallow waters of the world, in lakes and in oceans, and even in the harshest deserts and the Arctic. Of course, there are areas with little to no plants scattered across regions such as the Sahara or Greenland or Antarctica. But there are also areas here with small plants, mainly mosses and such, that pop up to say hello when the conditions are just right. To find somewhere guaranteed to be devoid of plant life, you have to escape the sun. Deep in caves and at the bottom of the deep ocean, you can be pretty much guaranteed no plant life there. Other than that, plants are quite resilient and can grow in some incredibly harsh conditions. We owe our lives to plants. It is fair to say that animals and plants have a truly symbiotic relationship. We couldn't live without them. They produce the very air that we breathe. The wood from trees is used to make houses, tools, and musical instruments. All of our food comes either from plants directly or from other animals that have directly consumed plants. Even to make the most simple Irish stew, you would need potatoes, onions, carrots, grass, yes, grass, to feed your lamb, wheat for your flour, pepper if you want it. The list goes on and on. Many people choose to eat only plants directly, to various degrees, through vegetarianism or veganism. And I must say, I've been impressed with the delicious vegan dishes that have been available the past few years. I used to think vegan meals would be bland. Not the case at all. And now, here's one of my favourite things to make at this time of year at Christmas, and it's completely plant-based. Mulled wine. First things first, we're gonna need some wine. And you could make it with just one bottle, but I like to use a few more than that. Maybe more than that. And maybe even a little more than that. and you pour your wine into a big old pot. 5 bottles is what I usually use. Pour them all in. Then we've got to heat it up. Now I'm going to awkwardly cut an apple so I can get it in the shot. Just cut it in half so that it helps to open up the flavour and pop it in. Then again with an orange. Take 1/2 of the orange and squeeze it like mad, the whole thing into the pot. Get all them bits out. And then once you're done, put the actual orange into the pot. Next we're going to take some cloves, and we're going to puncture the second half of the orange with the cloves. This part can kind of hurt your fingers. Once you've completely done the whole orange, you want to put that into the pot too. Next up, we're going to take a cinnamon stick, crack it in half just to help open up the flavors, and pop it in. Now in Ireland we have this stuff called mulled wine spice, and it comes like a little tea bag like this. It's handy to put in. You can use nutmeg yourself and different spices, but I like to use a whole box of this stuff. Then I throw in some grapes. You can put as many as you want in. Demerara sugar. This is an important thing because it gives a warm flavour to it, and you want to put in a hefty amount. Make sure to stir so that you can let all of that sugar melt. Then a little bit of orange juice, maybe a fair bit of orange juice. Keep stirring even if it looks a little bit funky. And then once you start to see some light steam, that's when you know it's ready. You don't want the alcohol to boil away.
But Stephen, I hear you cry. And Freddie, he hears you cry. What about trees and flowers and roots and mycorrhizal fungi? Yes, I know there are a few of you asking about mycorrhizal fungi. Don't worry, that's all coming in future episodes. So if you want to see all of that stuff, make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss something. And next time that you want to learn about life by the fireside, grab yourself a nice warm drink, get yourself cozy, and come and learn with myself and Fred. And I'll see you then.